initially they called and said they wanted to do a show called Mr. and Mrs. Hartley. And they wanted to take Bob and Suzanne's characters from the Bob Newhart show and put them in a different location. And I passed because I said I really felt like those characters have already been created by other people, and one of the people was somebody I was working with, and Dave Davis. So I said I just wouldn't feel right doing that. So a little bit of time went by, and they came back and they said, well, what about there won't be Mr. and Mrs. Hartley, it'll be Bob and Suzanne, but it can be whatever you want to do. And I said, but Bob and Suzanne are always going to be Mr. and Mrs. Hartley together. So I said, I think no. So I turned it down a second time. So then they came back and they said, what about just Bob Newhart and anything you want to do? And I went, that's hard to turn down. So I said, okay. So I started thinking about the challenge for me, and by the way, and I had talked to Glenn and Les about it too before taking it on, because I knew they had worked on the Bob Newhart show, and they said, I think you'd be great writing for Newhart. They said, I think you've really got his sensibility, and you have a kind of a similar kind of, low-key comedy or whatever. So I said, okay. So, and I had been a fan of Newhart's from the time I was a kid. I used to listen to his comedy albums, so I was relishing the opportunity, but I was also very much aware that the Bob Newhart show was a big hit and pretty much ingrained in people. And we were going to do the show with only 1 year interruption between the Bob Newhart show and this one. So he was still going to be very fresh in people's minds. And I tried very hard not to be just different for the sake of being different. I said, I tried to just divorce myself from the fact that he had a show. And I said, if I'm given the talent of Bob Newhart and I can do anything I want to do, I'm going to just try to come up with something that feels right for him. And if it happens to be similar to the other show, so be it. And if it's not, so be it. So that was really what my thinking was. And there were certain things that I thought he couldn't be or shouldn't be. He's not a blue-collar guy. I mean, Bob's got intelligence, and so I said, so he's going to be somewhat more white-collar, more cerebral. And when I was in college, I read all of Kaufman and Hart's plays. I was a huge fan of Kaufman and Hart, still am, and the play George Washington Slept Here just stuck with me as something that I'd always liked, and I had a fascination with New England, which was another place I'd never been at the time. But I loved American history, and I loved the whole idea of New England, and I said, that sort of felt right. I started picturing Bob in a cardigan in front of a fireplace, in front of a fire, and kind of a library. I mean, this is really how it began, and I said, oh, I like that setting, I like the way he looks there, and that led to, I tried to combine that with George Washington Slept Here. I said, what if he was a writer? I wanted him to be a writer. I thought that would be interesting, but I also wanted him to be this innkeeper. And I couldn't reconcile the two. And I said, I think it'd be great if he was this innkeeper and he was into American history, but, I really see him in this library as a writer. And I was sharing this with Sheldon Bull, and Sheldon said, well, why can't he be both? And I went, oh, there you go. That's a great idea. So I said, so he'll be a writer who buys an inn in New England and gets to love American history and still write his books and meet his wacky characters. And from that standpoint, obviously, as an innkeeper, he got to meet the people in the small town. He was from New York. He got to meet eccentric people who would come to the, whether they be vendors or people staying there. And so it gave me the same advantage that his first show had, getting to work as a psychiatrist with people he was the grounded one and they were all crazy. This way he got to meet crazy people and he could still be the grounded one. So.
Were there any other concepts you had early on that you threw out? Actually, no. No, although it took me a little while to come up with that one. I was trying not to put myself under any pressure to it's funny, I've never sat down to create a show. I used to say for years, I said, I have no idea what a show is. I do have a pretty good idea of what a show isn't. So somebody would say something to me and I go, no, I know that's not a show. And if I couldn't figure out a reason why it wasn't, then I thought, well, then maybe it is. So in this particular case, I just worked with those images and nothing else. And I did have something, like I said, I had the idea that he loved American history, and I liked the idea of him relocating, because in Chicago, he was the fish in water, and here he would be the fish out of water. So I thought I had something there that I could hold on to. Didn't really need a lot more than that. So, like I said, I liked the idea of him being a writer because I thought that was good for Bob. He was cerebral, and later on I decided he would be a how-to writer. I didn't make him too smart.